Hello, my name is Keith Benninghoff. I'm the marketing manager for MSC Filtration Technologies out of Enfield, Connecticut. Welcome to this presentation and thank you for watching. This presentation is primarily focusing on our products, industries, and applications, and is primarily developed for folks who would like to either distribute or represent our products in the marketplace. So thank you again, and let's get started. So our company was founded in 1962 by Stanley Pete Johnson, and our original office was located in Hazardville, Connecticut. The original name of the company was Manufacturing Services Corporation, and that is what the MSC stands for in MSC Filtration Technologies today. Today we're located in Enfield, Connecticut in an 8,200 square foot building where we manufacture, warehouse, sell, and engineer our products. MSC designs, engineers, and manufactures a variety of fluid filtration and handling equipment for a variety of applications and industries. The primary industries we sell to are machine tool, lube and hydraulics, and process industries. And our products reduce waste, improve fluid cleanliness, increase equipment reliability, and improve working conditions. On the left, you'll see some of our standard offerings, which include our FilClean line of filter carts, which can be used in a whole host of different industries and applications. Our Tramp oil separator, which is primarily used in the machine tool industry for removing oil from machine tool coolant. And also our Phoenix membrane vacuum oil dehydrator, which is primarily used in the lubrication and hydraulic market for removing water from contaminated oil systems. And this is built exclusively by MSC Filtration Technologies. In addition to our own product lines, MSC also represents and distributes a variety of complementary fluid handling and filtration product lines, including industrial fluid chillers, fluid pumps, vacuum systems, and magnetic filters. So with over 50 years of fluid filtration and handling experience, and also because we supply and distribute other non-MSC complementary filtration and handling products, we're actually able to integrate the best product into one single customer-centric solution based on our customer's requirement, budget, and available footprint. So for instance, on the left, you'll see a system which is a centralized coolant filtration system for a machine shop that has multiple machines. The machines are putting out both ferric magnetic particles and also non-magnetic particles. And we have integrated a rotating drum magnetic filter where multiple machines pump their coolant into to remove ferric particles. And then the coolant goes down into a gravity bed filter for non-ferric particles and then drops into a storage tank. It is then pumped back out through some fluid pumps that we also represent. So one single filtration machine for our customers versus them having to go out and get multiple different solutions for their problem. On the bottom, you'll see another system, which is also a coolant filtration system. And in this case, the customer required not only coolant that met a certain cleanliness, but also one that maintained a certain temperature. So what we did was integrate a coolant chiller, a drop-in chiller, into a tank along with some disposable filter media and coolant pumps. So this met a specific footprint for the customer where this particular filtration system can be wheeled up to a machining center. The coolant drops into it and then is pumped right back out to their machine for lubricating their tooling and also cooling their parts. So MSC's metalworking solutions are primarily sold to machine shops and machine tool manufacturers. And our primary goal is on the machine tool coolant side is to keep their coolant looking like this rather than this. And the reason being is that contaminant that gets into this particular coolant, which can wash off the part or come from chips and particulate due to the machining process, can cause wear and tear on the customer's machine tool, which can be fairly expensive to replace if it breaks. It can also affect the finish of the part and also cause the customer to have to shut their machine down, and when it's not running, it's not making any money, to change coolant prematurely, which can take several hours in some cases. In addition, there's a cost of buying new coolant that might not necessarily need to be replaced if you can keep it clean. And it also affects the work environment because it can start to smell and also can cause dermatological issues for operators of the machines themselves. So MSC has a variety of ways of tackling those kind of problems, and it basically depends on the machining type, the type of machine, the type of coolant being used. But in some cases, we can extend the life of our customers' coolants indefinitely, and they only need to replace the coolant via makeup because of losses, because of spills, or because of drag out from the parts waste. So here is a map of a machine shop of most of the products that MSC sells to the metalworking industry. And I'll actually be covering most of them in this presentation. But if there's an excellent map on our website, if you are ever interested in taking a look at a machine shop and trying to find the exact product and where it's located, typically in a machine shop. So the first MSC product for metalworking solutions I'll talk about is our Tramp oil separator. Tramp oils are oils that coat metal parts. The raw metal comes in with oil on it. And when the water-based coolant is washing over it, that oil can be washed off into the coolant and build up in the whole machine coolant sump. And if it, in addition, in some cases on some older machines, they can actually have hydraulic leaks, where some hydraulic oil can actually leak into the coolant and also build up. Either of those types of oils, if they're not separated out of the coolant and removed, they'll actually build up over time, and they'll cause bacterial growth, foul-smelling odors, dermatological issues for the workers, where if they touch the coolant, they can actually start to break out. Short coolant life, meaning that the customer will then need to bring the machine down, and can take literally hours sometimes to clean the machine out because they need to flush the whole coolant supply system out to make sure there's no bacteria in it or no more oil in the system. So the Tramp oil separator helps prevent that. And over here on the left, you can see some Tramp oil forming on the top of coolant, this brown material that floats to the top of the coolant because the coolant is water-based. Tramp oil is oil, oil floats to the top. And that is how we separate it out and remove it from the coolant. Now, the oil sep has been around for a while. MSC has been building them for a long time and has thousands of these in the field. It's very simple to use. It has very few moving parts, very few consumables, very high quality, durable construction. There are more inexpensive plastic versions of these on the market, but they are not nearly as durable as the product, as the oil sep that we make. And it works significantly better than oil skimmers for a variety of reasons. And we have a very good video online on our website that will review the benefits of our technology versus the standard technology that's on the market today. It has very little coolant carryover, meaning that there's very little coolant waste associated with this. The customer throws out 90 to 95% Tramp oil, and the coolant remains on the machine. It's available in permanent installations and also portable models where it can be moved from machine to machine to remove Tramp oil that's built up. And the other thing is the process of separating out the Tramp oil is very easy on the coolant. It does not affect the chemistry of the coolant at all. So you can run these indefinitely and not worry about stripping out any additives that might be in the coolant like you might with a centrifuge or something else. So here is actually how the Tramp oil Tramp oil separator works, and what you're looking at over here is a coolant sump, a machine sump, and you can see Tramp oil starting to form on the top of the coolant. And if that's left to go, it will actually build up a very, very thick layer on top of the coolant, and again start to smell and cause problems for the machine. So we have a floating suction on the Tramp oil that has floats on it, and we bring the coolant to we pull the coolant into this floating suction into our Tramp oil separator. So we're only removing the top 1 inch of coolant from the machine tool sump. The coolant is pumped into the Tramp oil separator goes through 3 different stages, 3 different sections. So here is your dirty section where you can see basically sort of a blend of Tramp oil and coolant coming into our system. There on this section you have the separation stage where Tramp oil is being separated out of the coolant. It floats to the top of the coolant and drops over a drain for disposal. So this will actually drop off, and the customer can open that drain up and drain off the Tramp oil occasionally into a bucket or collection vessel so they can dispose of it. And then over here is the clean coolant return side, which is continually gravity feeds back to the coolant sump in just a gravity fed sort of way. And you can see the effectiveness of the Tramp oil separator here, where you see the dirty side, the separation side, and how clean it actually is returning back to the sump. And here's a little better picture of the Tramp oil separator and how it's typically installed and used. So over here on the left, you'll see the floating suction that I talked about, Tramp oil forming on top of the coolant. And what the benefit of our technology is that we're continually drawing any Tramp oil that forms on top of the coolant towards that sump or towards that suction, because it's pulling off the top 1 inch of coolant all the time. So we don't allow any Tramp oil to really form in this sump, since it's continually being brought to the floating suction and pumped into our Tramp oil separator. Unlike, for instance, a skimmer, which sits just in one spot of the sump, and the Tramp oil has to basically sort of just float to it to get to it. So you can actually get a buildup of a lot of Tramp oil in there before it's actually removed. So in our case, we're actually pumping our Tramp oil into our system. It will go through either a fairly inexpensive disposable filter, or in this case a strainer basket to protect our pump from any chips that might get in, then through an air diaphragm pump and into our system. And the air diaphragm pump has a flow control valve, and our system comes with everything needed for hookup, including air regulator, filter, air filter, and also air flow control valve for the pump. The coolant comes in, flows through our system, separates out the Tramp oil. Tramp oil then can be manually drained off into a container for disposal, and then you end up with clean coolant on this side that overflows and gravity feeds back to the sump in a continuous manner. So the system, as I said before, simple to use, very few moving parts, and is really the last Tramp oil separator a customer will ever need to buy for their system. So the next product I'll talk about is our FilClean line of filter carts for the metalworking industry. And what happens is, in most cases, most machine shops have a chip conveyor that sits under the machine, where coolant and chips from the machining process fall, and the chip conveyor then drags out that waste before the coolant is reintroduced down into the sump of the machine for then reuse to be pumped back out and be reused in the machining process. What happens though in a lot of cases is chip conveyors don't catch all the particulate that the machining process generates, and you end up with smaller particles of machining waste and chips and whatever that fall back into the sump. And since it's continually kidney looped around the machine tool, those will eventually build up in the sump and in the coolant. And that can cause a whole host of problems, from pump failures to pump cloggings to poor parts finishes. As these particulates build up in the coolant, they can actually start to affect the parts finish, including shortened machine tool life as well. So the machine tools could potentially overheat and break because that can cause friction. And also shortened coolant life, where you get into the same situation as Tramp oil, where you have to take the machine down to throw away your coolant, buy new coolant, clean the whole system out, and that takes time. So MSC builds a couple of different filter carts for different machining applications. One is the FilClean MS Mudsucker, which is this one, which is used on, tends to be used on heavier machining applications and chips. In a lot of cases, for instance, aluminum, which can get build up in a machine tool sump and float and also sink. What this does is you can put the suction and return of this into the machine sump, and it'll stir all that contaminant up and filter it out so that the coolant stays clean. Very simple to use. It's air driven and fairly and very, very effective. And the ROI compared to cleaning out a machine tool and the trouble of cleaning out a machine tool to have one of these is significant. The other filter system we make, filter cart system, is our FilClean Dome or DMS skid, which is primarily made for grinding applications. It works very similar, where you would put the suction and return hose into the sump of the machine, but grinding applications tend to be much finer particles than heavy machining applications. And in this case, we use our Dome cartridge filters, where we will pump the oil through these cartridges to keep the machine tool coolant clean. And here's an example of what happens, for instance, if a machine was originally built to, say, machine something like steel or iron, and then got converted to machine something like aluminum. Here is a chip conveyor that sits under the machine and drags out machining waste into a container for disposal or reuse or recycling. And your coolant is pouring down from inside the machine through this conveyor and then back down into a sump. Now, in many or most machining applications, the machining contaminant or waste that's generated during the machining process would be large enough that it would get trapped by this conveyor and dragged out and not end up in the coolant. But because aluminum can form slivers, like you see here, these tiny slivers, those are very small and can actually fall through the chip conveyor and build up in the coolant over time. Over time, aluminum can tend to float on top of the coolant, and it also sinks to the bottom of the sumps. Because of that, as it builds up and up, it can start to cause problems with coolant pumps because they can start to plug, or the coolant distribution, it can start to plug hoses, and also again start to affect the parts finish of the machining process. So the MSC Mudsucker in this case is something that can get dropped into the coolant sump, the hoses, the suction hoses and return hoses, and it pumps that, it creates enough turbulence in this sump to stir up all that particulate and pull it out of the sump, preventing it from building up. And that is what the FilClean MS Mudsucker and the FilClean Dome are, except the Dome does that for primarily for grinding applications versus machining applications. The next product I'll talk about is our Clean IDX, which is a indexing, gravity-fed indexing filter. And this would be used on a machining process primarily where there are a lot of contaminants, and disposable filtration isn't really an option. And the way these work is you'll have a roll of filter media over here, and the coolant gravity feeds out of the machine into the IDX. And as it's going down across the filter media, your particulate builds up. And as it builds up on this filter media, your coolant then starts to back up as it gets restricted. And when it backs up, there's a float or some electrical probes that the coolant will contact and lift. And when it does, your roll media will then index off the machine into a container, and so to a clean spot, and it will just continue to do that. The benefits of this technology is that it's been around a while, but roll media is very inexpensive, and you end up with a automatic compressed pack of filter media and machined waste that is in a sump that's easy to dispose of. And this can be used on both grinding and regular machine applications, and then basically set next to a coolant sump and the material sent back to the sump. Flows are available 13 to 105 gallons per minute, and it significantly reduces waste. And we can also install a rotating magnetic filter here. It's not actually shown here, but so that the coolant comes in and goes through a rotating drum magnetic filter to remove iron particles first, and that comes out as a dry cake. And then the regular coolant then goes down into the paper bed filter for final polishing. So it can be incorporated with both a grinder, a magnetic filter, and a paper bed filter, and is very economical to operate once it's installed. And here is one of our systems installed on a machine tool. Here is the gravity feed for the coolant into the machine. And we actually incorporated, in addition to the gravity filter, which is basically acting as a pre-filter, we then also installed a disposable cartridge filter for polishing back to the machine. So we have the capability at MSC to kind of build, like I said before, the correct solution for the customer. To make sure it's the most economical and easy solution for them to use. And the next product is our FilClean CR Coolant Recycling line. We are able to actually, with our coolant recycles, in many cases, extend the life of our customers' coolants indefinitely. And the way we work with our customers as far as recycling their coolant so that it can be reused indefinitely is we partner with them. It's not just a matter of selling equipment. It's also working with them to maintain correct chemistry while they're recycling and they're taking care of their coolant correctly. So we tend to think of this as a partnership between us, the management at the facility that wants to recycle, and also the customer's coolant supplier, who would all need to be involved for a good, effective recycling program. We make both a 3-tank recycler design, which actually could handle up to about 1,200 gallons of coolant per day. And for smaller shops, a smaller 2-tank recycler. There's an excellent video on our website about the whole recycling process, how it works, what we recommend. That is excellent for anybody who wants to learn about the process. It's about 13 minutes long, but it's fairly in depth as to how the whole process works. In the right situation, it's got a very an amazing return on investment, in some cases 6 months. It's not very difficult to do, so it's a fairly simple operation. And again, it provides all the same benefits of keeping your coolant clean, reduced machine tool downtime, reduced environmental footprint, increased tool life, improved parts finishes, and of course improved work environment. So there are a lot of benefits to recycling coolant on site. And here you'll find one of our recyclers at a fairly large machining installation. And what I'd like to point out is you'll see the sign that says same coolant since 2008. So this customer has actually been using their same coolant since 2008, with the exception of having to make up for spills, of course, and also machine tool drag out. So as you have a chip conveyor that's dragging out machining waste, there is a coolant that coats the parts, etc., that is not recoverable. But what they do is they'll bring their coolant out of their machines to this recycler and then take cleaned recycled coolant back to their machines in a continuous process. And over here you'll see that there's been over 80,000 barrels of coolant saved and counting. This is actually a fairly old picture, so there's been a lot more than that saved since then. You'll see our 2-tank recyclers, 3-tank recyclers here, and also another 2-tank recycler in the smaller shop. Again, we have a very good video online to go over the whole process, which I would recommend you take a look at if you're interested in learning more about recycling itself. So the last area I wanted to discuss regarding our metalworking solutions, coolant filtration and handling products, is our custom coolant filtration and handling systems, which I discussed a little bit earlier on in this presentation. And these systems are designed around what our customers' material are being machined, number of machines they have that they want to filter, contaminant size and type, the amount of coolant that they are actually using, the coolant type, and also the machining type. Are they machining heavy material, or are they doing some sort of grinding? And what we're able to do again is integrate several technologies into one solution for the coolant filtration and handling application. And for instance, up top here, what you see is a centralized coolant filtration system for grinding applications, where there are actually 6 different grinders in this machine shop. And each one of them will pump their coolant into this machine across a rotating drum magnetic filter to remove grinding fines from the coolant. So what happens is the coolant from each grinding machine is pumped down across this rotating drum magnetic filter that indexes. The ferric particles are attached to the drum, and as it rotates, then the material builds up a cake and is scraped off and drops down into containers for disposal or recycling. Then in the back are coolant pumps that will return the coolant to each machine. So this does everything, filtering and pumping the coolant to each specific machine. All of this is controlled by a single control cabinet engineered and designed by MSC Filtration, so that operators can control each one of these pumps on and off, can also control the magnetic filters as well. And in addition, we engineer and design our own tanks, which is where the clean coolant is stored before it's pumped back out to each of the machining centers. In addition, we have CAD capability at MSC, to engineer and draw up any designs that we find are viable for the customer's applications and solution. And on the bottom is actually a product that we are going to make standard due to its popularity. And it's basically a filter cart similar to the dome or mudsucker cart, fill clean carts that I discussed earlier, with one exception, that we will include a manually cleanable magnetic filter to recover ferric particles or things like carbide for reclaim and resale or reuse. And what the magnetic filter does is it basically acts as a pre-filter to the particulate filter, which is the polishing filter. So what the magnetic filter does in ferric applications is it allows the pre-filter to last longer, and it also allows the material to that is trapped by the magnetic filter to be scraped off as and recycled or resold like carbide is. Carbide is very valuable to get money for it. And this magnetic filter can be used indefinitely. It basically never needs to be replaced. It just gets pulled out, cleaned, and put back in. So here are a couple of systems in our custom coolant filtration area. And again, when I talk about custom coolant filtration, it can be one single filtration system for a specific machine tool, or it can be a specific centralized system for multiple machines, like up here in this photo, where you've got multiple machining centers all feeding into one pipe that sends their coolant over into our machine. The material is filtered and chilled to a certain temperature and then pumped back to each machine through a separate pipe header that you see up here. So in many cases, we can design an entire filtration system for single filtration system for one machine shop or multiple machines, or a single filtration system for one specific machine that might be having some issues. Here's a example of the system that I discussed up here, where you've got a gravity bed, a large gravity bed filter that the coolant from each machining center is gravity fed down into. It goes through the paper filtration media. When this filter media is plugged, it automatically indexes out into a container for waste disposal. The coolant then gravity feeds down into this tank and is then chilled and meets a certain temperature by this particular drop-in chiller, and then is pumped back out into the cooling centers in a continuous manner. So we're continually removing machine tool waste and keeping the sumps clean. And this is in lieu of, say, having a single filtration system on each one of these machines up here, separate machines. You end up with one single centralized system handling all of them. Another system up here works very, very similar. It's a little smaller, but again, it handles multiple machines. This is a system that we brought back in and actually upgraded and fixed and repaired. This system I discussed earlier, a multiple machine grinding system that was designed for specific material being machined, specific machine shop, specific machine coolant flow. Here's the single machine system for the specific grinding machine that I had talked about earlier. And here's another system that we had designed specifically for a machine tool application to keep their particular coolant clean. So if you don't see on our website exactly what you're looking for, you can certainly just ask the customer what they're trying to achieve, and in most cases we can come up with a solution for them. So now I'll actually get into our lubrication and hydraulic solutions, which covers a whole variety of different industries. We've sold to paper, power, chemical, mining, marine, on and offshore oil rigs, refineries, and road machinery. The primary focus is filtration and keeping lubrication, hydraulic systems, and gearboxes, keeping them reliable by keeping their lubrication clean. So the cleaner you can keep lubrication, the longer you'll keep your bearings and gears and hydraulic systems from failing. And that's what our main goal is here. And over here on the left, you'll actually see some damage caused by lubricating oil. Here's a bearing that has been damaged by particulate over time. Again, we have a pretty good video online called Water and Particulate in Lubrication and Hydraulic Oil, what's all the fuss about, which can go into the damage, the types of damage that particulate and water contamination in lubricating oil can cause these systems. And it's fairly in depth. It's about 14 minutes long, but it'll make you an expert on lubricating oil and why it needs to be, or lubricating and hydraulic oil, and why it should be kept as clean and dry as possible. So our job is to reduce the damage to gearboxes, lube systems, and hydraulic equipment caused by water and particulate contamination. And then, of course, reduce that equipment downtime, reduce the purchase of new lube and hydraulic oil, and, of course, improve the work environment of our customers. And we have a couple of unique products to do that. So the first product I'll talk about in our lube and hydraulic solution line is our Phoenix membrane vacuum oil dehydrator and purifier, which is the world's very first commercialized portable membrane oil vacuum dehydrator that's been put on the market. And it's exclusively built by MSC Filtration Technologies, so it sets us apart from a lot of companies on the market in as far as oil dehydration for lube and hydraulics. And what it does is it removes 100% free water, 100% emulsified water, and dissolved water from contaminated gearboxes and other lube and hydraulic oil reservoirs. So these systems can get contaminated with not just particulate, but also water from things like cooler leaks. A lot of customers use water coolers to cool the oil because it generates heat, and sometimes those leak, or sometimes water gets in just from the atmosphere, or sometimes in lubrication systems there are steam seals between the bearings, and those sometimes steam can get through the bearing and into the lubricating oil. So water can actually ingress into these lube and hydraulic systems from a variety of different areas and cause quite a few problems for the customers. It also reduces particulate contamination in the oil. So what happens in these lube oil systems is if you don't have good filtration, particulate can build up in them and eventually damage the components and the rotating equipment components in those systems. The real true benefit of the Phoenix is that it's an oil dehydrator that's as simple to use as a filter cart, whereas most of the dehydration products on the market today are pretty complicated to use, are fairly expensive, and are not very compact. Our unit, you're able to get around up through very tight spaces, like in the Coast Guard. You're able to get it through hatches and down into engine rooms so that they can get water out of their contaminated systems, which happens on board ships quite a bit. We also make this in a standard electrical version, but also in a hazardous duty design for refineries and gas plants and offshore oil rigs, including an all air-driven version. And there really is no other vacuum oil dehydrator on the market today that is all complete air-driven, which in some hazardous duty locations is what is required. And up here you'll see a quick shot. You'll see this in the next couple of slides of what it does. This is dirty oil with water and particulate contamination, and this is what we made it look like. So it's a very unique product to MSC. We spent years developing it, making it better, making it easier to use, and certainly does set us apart in the marketplace today. So here you're actually seeing the Phoenix in the field on two applications. One here is actually at a refinery. This is our 4-gallon per minute hazardous duty Phoenix. And what it's doing is it's filtering lubricating oil in a 700-gallon oil reservoir over here. And this oil reservoir is supplying lubricating oil to the bearing of a gas compressor. And what has happened is the customer has gotten a seal leak where they had moisture get in through one of the seals into this oil reservoir and contaminate it. And again, if it wasn't taken care of, they would either have to throw away 700 gallons of oil, which is costly, so dispose of it and buy new oil, or live with the problem and end up with a bearing failure eventually, and then a piece of very critical equipment at the refinery that would not be working and would require a repair. So we put this on, and it basically is kidney looping oil, bringing oil out of this oil reservoir and pumping it back into this reservoir. And this is what the oil looked like when we started, and this is what the particulate looks like when we started. It was fairly dirty. And when we had it hooked up for about a day or two, this is what the oil looked like after we were done, and this is what the particulate looked like after we were done. So they basically put this on, let it run, and we saved 700 gallons of oil. Over here is a different application, and this is a drilling rig at a rental company that rents road construction equipment. This is a drilling rig for pylons. So this drills holes and for driving pylons into the ground. And what happened here is our customer rented it to their customer, the rig here, and what happened was a brick got accidentally dropped onto the top of their oil reservoir, their main oil reservoir. It's about 150 gallons here, and cracked it. And as it sat outside and the customer was using it, rainwater got into this hydraulic reservoir and contaminated it. And the big problem with that is, if you see all these pistons here, pistons here and pistons here and pistons here, they are all fed from this hydraulic oil reservoir. So all that water, that hot, poor quality oil and water, got pumped throughout all these systems and hoses and all throughout through the machine. And so even if the customer went ahead and changed their oil in this oil reservoir, as soon as they put new oil in and started to pump and move these pistons, all the dirty oil would just get pumped back in, and they might have to change that oil 4 or 5 or 6 times to flush the whole system out, sometimes even longer, because oil or water can actually collect in some of these drip legs and hoses and be in there for a long, long time. So instead, they rented our Phoenix here, and they kidney looped it off the reservoir here. They just basically took the oil, pumped the oil out and back in, and just kept dehydrating it. And what happened is, and then they would wait for the oil to clear up, and then they would cycle their machine pistons and move all these pistons, and that would force the oil, the dirty oil, back into the reservoir. It would haze up again. They'd let it dehydrate and clear up, and they would just keep flushing out the system, and it saved them from having to change their oil 4 or 5 times to try to flush that out. And this is what the oil looked like as we started, and this is what it looked like as we ended. And again, they didn't have to do anything except move their machines, their pistons back and forth. Our equipment runs very simply. Turn it on and kind of set it and forget it. And it worked out very well for them. So the Phoenix is very unique and different than most of the dehydration, lube and hydraulic dehydration products on the market today. And that is because instead of a very complicated machine to do the necessary work, we use a proprietary hollow fiber bundle technology over here. And we use 2 different sizes based on the flow rate of the machine of the Phoenix we're using. And so what you see here is a bunch of hollow spaghettis, and they run the length of this bundle all the way down. And what we do is we pump the oil across this bundle, through this bundle, where it goes to a center core and comes out back to the oil reservoir or oil system. And over here is a better picture where we actually pull a vacuum on the inside of this hollow fiber using a vacuum pump that's supplied on the machine. And what happens is as you're pumping the oil across the fiber, the oil is actually rejected by the membrane. But moisture and water molecules can permeate through to the other side because you create an imbalance when you pull a vacuum on the inside of the fiber. So that is how the separation takes place. Water molecules are actually permeating through this membrane, and the membrane acts as a barrier to the oil. And then the oil is returned to the reservoir. Now this is then the moisture is actually exhausted out of the vacuum pump as water vapor. Yeah, so you don't actually necessarily see it. Sometimes you might get some condensation on very, very high water ingression rates, but in most cases the water is actually blown out of the machine as water vapor, and the customer never sees it. Down here you can actually see a result of what the unit did on gear oil in a gearbox at a paper plant. And down here you can actually see some free water. And this is what the oil looked like after we were done treating it. This is what the particulate looks like before, and this is what the particulate looked like afterwards. So it's a very simple machine compared to the technology on the markets today that require a lot of complicated controls to control vacuum, whereas ours, we are just pumping oil just like you would through a filter cart across this membrane continuously and pulling a vacuum continuously instead of cycling the machine on and off. So it also allows us to make a very compact machine, something that's easy to get up on catwalks and moved around plants and down into basements, or in the Coast Guard's situation, down into engine rooms of ships through hatches and things like that. But it's still very, very, very effective. And again, very unique to the market and exclusive to MSC Filtration Technologies. On our website, you'll find a significant amount of videos on the Phoenix use in the field, and also quite a few field reports and different industries that it's been used on that can be shared with customers. So the next product line I'll discuss is our line of lube and hydraulic oil filtering carts, which are primarily used to transfer, filter, or kidney loop oil out of equipment such as gearboxes or other lube and hydraulic systems. And we make two different models. One is our LHC model, which is our two-wheeled carts, and those are available in 1, 5, and 10 gallons per minute. You can get one or two filters with this particular cart. One filter could be, for instance, a water absorbing filter, followed by a particulate filter, or you could get a larger micron pre-filter followed by a tighter particulate filter. These are very, very well-built carts. There are a lot of inexpensive, cheaper carts on the market. We build a cart that is meant for areas that they're going to get banged around, moved around, service companies where they're going to take the carts outside, use them in driving rain, or in other tough areas and paper plants where there's a lot of moisture or just a lot of rough handling. The whole cart is, the plumbing of the cart is steel. You'll find other carts out there that have plastic tubing as supply tubing to the filters, or hoses of some sort. Ours are all hard piped. Every cart has filter plugged indicators and upstream oil sample valves. The lube and hydraulics carts come in two different models. One is a medium duty model where you'll get a TEFC total fan enclosed motor and a aluminum gear pump with an integrated relief valve. That's for medium duty applications. And then for heavy duty applications, you can get our cart that has a washdown duty motor and a steel Viking gear pump. So for things like very thick or heavy gear oils, or in places where you're going to be outdoors in driving rain, you'll be able to use our carts indefinitely, and they will last forever. Very, very tough built, excellent design. We include a drip pan under the filters for changing the filters, and just quite a versatile cart, and we make it as compact and as light as possible for moving around. The second type of cart we make is our higher flow cart, which is our OFC, or oil flushing cart, and that comes in 25, 50, or 100 gallons per minute. And so this would be for much larger oil reservoirs, for transferring oil or flushing those systems out or filtering them, and moving around from system to system to move oil out of these reservoirs for maintenance or for topping off of those reservoirs. Again, very durable, steel, hard plumbed. And also the other thing with all of our carts is we try to use JIC hydraulic fittings as much as possible versus NPT, which can tend to leak over time, especially in lube and hydraulic oil. They're not really meant for the lube and hydraulic side. And they also tend to be a little dirtier as far as introducing contaminant into the system. So although we can't completely use JIC fittings because certain parts of the cart you have to use NPT, but most of the time we try to use JIC hydraulic fittings to make sure that the carts are leak resistant or leak proof, and they're easy to tighten up if anything comes loose, to prevent oil from leaking out from the carts if anything were to ever happen. So it's very, very durable, flows up to 1 to 100 gallons per minute, high quality, tough all steel construction and plumbing, no cheap hoses, choice of steel or aluminum gear pumps, available in certainly just like our Phoenix in hazardous duty and all air driven, and again available in a single or dual filter element. Quick availability. So what we do is we just try to aim to please the customer as far as what their duty is, what their budget is, and what their applications are as far as this particular product. So the next product on the market in our lube and hydraulic solutions area is our FilClean TK portable tank filter cart. And what this does is it allows customers to store and pump and filter oil in one cart versus having to move, say, a 55-gallon drum around of oil to different locations. And what you're able to do is you're able to pump oil into this tank and then either kidney loop the oil and filter it in this tank, or transfer it back out into a different oil reservoir. It comes in 25, 50, and 100-gallon tank designs, 1, 5, and 10-gallon per minute versions. It's all steel construction, just like our LHC and OFC, very, very durable. We use JIC fittings, again, as much as possible over NPT fittings for leak resistance. You can get, again, just like our LHC carts, you can get 1 or 2 filters installed on these. And it's an excellent cart for customers that do work on, say, transportation or road equipment in maintenance facilities where they need to drain engines of oil, maybe filter that oil and then put the oil back into their systems, either engine oil or hydraulic oil, or in one case we have actually made this for antifreeze, where the customer can recycle and refill antifreeze for road construction equipment that the customer is working on. One customer, for instance, was doing a lot of rebuilds on engines, road machinery engines, and they would put the engine oil in the engines and run the engines for a couple of hours, but then they'd have to drain the oil and throw the oil away after because they couldn't ship the equipment with any oil in it. And so what we were able to do is provide this cart. They're able to pump the oil out of the engines into the tank, save it for the next machine, and make sure that it's well filtered before it goes back into the engines, to the next engine for reuse. So a very versatile cart, and I'll talk on the next page on how it works. So on this slide, it'll show basically how the FilClean TK can be configured for different oil filtering or transferring jobs. Again, it's a excellent cart for customers who are doing work on equipment. For instance, even if a customer was working on a gearbox and wanted to pull the oil out of the gearbox or the lube system and not throw it away, they could pull that oil out into the FilClean TK, filter it, and then once they were done working on that gearbox or lube system, they could pump the oil back in to continue to use it. And the FilClean TK then assures that the way it's configured, that oil will be well filtered and clean before it goes back into the customer's equipment. So, for instance, oil transferring and filtering is one configuration where if you had just say a 55-gallon drum of oil and you wanted to pump that oil out of the 55-gallon drum into a piece of equipment, you could configure the valving on the TK to do that just by setting some three-way valves, and it will pump out of a piece of equipment through our particulate filter and then out into the customer's equipment and ensure that it's being filtered. If, say, you want to fill our tank and not have to move a 55-gallon drum around, you could wheel our cart over to the 55-gallon drum, pump and configure the three-way valving to actually fill our tank with that oil so that you can then wheel that oil over to whatever equipment you are working on. So you can configure the valving also to actually pump out of the 55-gallon drum or piece of equipment that you're working on and into our oil reservoir. So this over here doesn't necessarily have to just be clean oil or a 55-gallon drum of equipment. It can also be a piece of equipment you're working on, like a lube system or a gearbox or a piece of road machinery, anything that has oil in it that you'd like to pull out and reuse while you work on that equipment. And the cart being portable can go wherever you need it to be. Then once you have filled the tank with whatever oil you have filled it, you can now configure the valving to recirculate out of our tank and through a filter and back to our tank and filter the oil to a particular cleanliness level before pumping it back into whatever equipment you would like. So you can then reconfigure the valving so that you pump out of our tank, again through our particulate filter, and then out into whatever piece of equipment you're working on. So again, very versatile piece of equipment, very durable, very easy to use, and the key is that it ensures that you're filtering your oil before you use it in your equipment, because you don't want to have any foreign material enter it. It's very easy to use. You basically turn it on. There is a flow control valve on the end of this hose up here that you just open and fill, and then when you're to a certain level of oil in your equipment, you then just close the valve and turn the machine off. And the final area or division I'll talk about is our Process Filtration Solutions division, which is primarily focused on paints, inks, and coatings. What we do is we provide filters, filter carts, bag filters, filter housings for this particular industry, and also custom solutions, so custom filter carts for this particular industry where they need to filter the coating, which is their product, like paint or printing ink or things like that, that need to be filtered, adhesives, before they're actually used or coated on whatever substrate or material or filled before shipping. And what we sell for as far as filter housings for our bag filter side in the process market, which uses quite a few bag housings and bag filters, is our FilClean BHQ line of bag filters, BHMR, and BHSB. The BHQ is a single round bag housing, but it has a quick clamp removal lid. So basically, you don't need any tools to remove the lid for this particular bag housing. We also have, just so you know, a whole line of bag filter elements to go in these bag housings as well. Then we have our line of BHMR, which are multi-round high-flow bag vessels. And also our BHSB, which is our single-round swing bolt design. In some cases, customers would prefer a swing bolt design where you do need a tool to open them compared to a quick disconnect lid. But we have the option for either. And they are all available in a variety of flows and materials of construction, including carbon steel, 304 and 316 stainless steel. And some of them are customizable as well, as far as connections and fittings and different sizes. So if your customer needs a specific fit up of some type, talk to us and we can certainly do that. And we can actually put these in parallel, like in this system, provide manifolded bag housings with isolation valves so that customers can change their bag filters while they're running their processes. Besides bag filters, we also sell a variety of cartridge filters. In this case, this is our FilClean DM Dome elements that are available in a variety of different applications, different materials, pleated paper, which is cellulose, which we use a lot in the machine tool industry, glass fiber, dual phase microglass, which is used in the lube and hydraulics industry, and pleated metal mesh. We also have an oil absorbing cartridge and water absorbing cartridge if we're trying to take some water out of oil. We can configure these housings into a variety of different custom filter carts, filter systems, depending on what the customer would like. Typically, it depends on, because the process markets deal with so many different types of fluids, we design based on the fluid flow rate, temperature, cleanliness level that the customer is looking for. So if your customer is looking for a specific type of filtration, just find out what the information is and give us a call. That more than likely it's something that we can build for them. So the final part of this presentation is just showing a few of our custom filter carts for process industries. Over here is a cart for filtering jet fuel. It's explosion proof, designed at MSC, and is of course needs explosion proof electricals, including pump motor, electrical controls, and all of this is pumped through a stainless bag filter for jet fuel test stands that needed particulate removed from them. Up here is a water purification cart using some specific filter housing specified by MSC, and another filter cart for coating process that was built by MSC, specifying some process filter housings for this customer specific application. So again, awful lot to talk about, but MSC is a shop dedicated to trying to find the correct solution and engineer the correct solution for the customer. And we can usually do these things fairly quickly and without a lot of hassle for the customer. So if they're looking for something in particular, we have an awful lot of experience to try to guide you or your customer towards the correct technology for it. So we've come to the end of this video. Thank you for watching. I have covered the three industries that we primarily serve, and most of our products, but not all. If there is something that you're interested in, please reach out to me at 860-214-5823. Also, if you're interested in representing or distributing our products as well, I'd be glad to discuss this with you. And I'm also going to provide some links here to some of the YouTube videos I mentioned for our coolant recyclers, our oil sep, and our Phoenix membrane oil purifier, along with our lubrication and hydraulics training videos. So I recommend, if you're interested in MSC and interested in representing or selling a high quality filtration solutions to your customers in a variety of industries, please reach out. We're very distributor and very representative friendly, and would be glad to discuss it with you. Thank you so much, and I hope to speak to you soon. Take care. Bye-bye.